After the decline of the Mauryas, the region of Magad became a political backwater in the history of northern India. But this position of Magad would not remain same for long, because we find that at the close of 3rd century AD, another power rose in Magad that would usher in the classical age of Indian history. We are talking about the Gupta Dynasty. And in this video, we will talk about how the rise of the Guptas happened. So before we talk about the rise of the Guptas, it is important to understand the political scenario of this period when the Gupta rose. So in order to understand that, we are going to look at the period of around 250 AD. In this period, we find that the political map of northern India is divided between different powers, and these different powers are competing with each other for the supremacy of northern India. It is in this situation we find that the rise of the Guptas happened. About the early Gupta rulers, we find that historians are not sure about their origin, and there is a considerable debate about this issue. And apart from this, we also see that even the base of these early Gupta rulers is a matter of debate. And I think when we look at the different historians who have worked on this issue, I find that Sriram Goyal in his book The Imperial Guptas provide us a convincing argument. He argues that the early Gupta ruled the eastern part of present day UP. And in order to buttress his argument, he provides us different evidence. For example, he argues that when we look at the early Gupta inscription, we find that most of these inscriptions are found in eastern UP. And apart from this, when we look at the early Gupta coins, we find that most of these early Gupta coins are found in the region of eastern UP. But most importantly, he argues that when we look at the one of the most important inscription of the Gupta rulers, which is the Prashasti of Samudragupta, which is found in Allahabad, he argues that the fact that Samudragupta chose Allahabad for his Prashasti means that the region of Prayagraj was the center of the Guptas. So I think because of these arguments, Sriram Goyal provide us a convincing argument that eastern UP was the base of the Guptas. Now, having established that the eastern UP region was the base of the Guptas, particularly the early Guptas, we find that before the rise of the Guptas in this region, it was the Magadhas who ruled this region, and it was around the end of 3rd century AD that the first ruler of the Gupta dynasty established his rule in this region. He was called Shri Gupta, or sometimes we see that Maharaj Gupta is also used. And about him, we do not have enough information. We have only his name from the chronologies of later Gupta rulers. And after Maharaj Gupta, we are told from these chronologies that Ghatotkacha-Gupta became the second ruler of the Gupta line. And about him, like his father, we know very little. But the third ruler of the Gupta line, whose name is Chandragupta, we have considerable information. And most of you have already know about the fact that Chandragupta married the daughter of the Licchavis, whose name was Kumar Devi. And with this marriage, we find that the alliance between the Guptas and the Licchavis became firmly established. And in order to commemorate this marriage, we find that Chandragupta first also issued coins in which Kumar Devi is also depicted. So you can see how important this marriage was for Chandragupta first. And when we look at this fact, it is pretty clear that for the Guptas, the matrimonial alliance with the Licchavis was an important achievement. And it can be also said that it was because of this matrimonial alliance that the rise of the Guptas truly happened. Or it is from this period onwards that the Guptas truly became a serious power. Now, we all know about this fact, but what is not well known is why this matrimonial alliance happened. So to answer this question, I think we have to look at the political dynamics of the late 3rd century AD in northern India and also in central India. And I think particularly the region of central India is important to answer our question. So when we look at central India, we find that after the fall of the Kushanas, it was in this region that the Nagas became a serious power. So the Nagas were ruling the present day Madhya Pradesh region, and we find that the south of the Nagas territory, once powerful Satvahana Empire, had also declined, and in its place in the Nagpur region another power has risen, and these were the Vakatakas. And we find that the Vakatakas, particularly the second ruler of the Vakatakas, whose name was Pravarsen, played an important role in the political dynamics of this period. What he did was that he married his son to the daughter of the king of the Nagas, whose name was Bhavnaga. So because of this matrimonial alliance between the Nagas and the Vakatakas, we find that this had a far-reaching impact in the politics of this period. So what happened was that now the Nagas and the Vakatakas have merged into a single power, and because of this the powers of northern India had to form alliances. So what we see is that in the region around Haryana, where different warrior republics used to rule, we find that the Yodhas also began to form alliances. And this can also be seen from the different inscription of the Yodhas, which tell us that there was some sort of an alliance between different republics that happened. In eastern India, to counter this threat, we find that the Licchavis and the Guptas formed an alliance, and this was in the form of a matrimonial alliance in which Chandragupta married the daughter of the Licchavis, whose name was Kumar Devi. Now this is what Shri Ram Goyal argues in his book, The Imperial Guptas. But I think there was another reason why there was this matrimonial alliance between the Licchavis and the Guptas. When we look at the Dharma Shastras, we find that Manu described these Licchavis as Vratya, which means orthodox or impure. So you can see that the Licchavis did not have a great social status. So what I think was that in order to gain social status, the Licchavi decided to marry their daughter with the Guptas, who in the eyes of the orthodox were considered pious. So what we find is that because they married or formed a matrimonial alliance with the Guptas, the Licchavis gained in social status. So I think this was another reason behind this matrimonial alliance. Another important thing we should keep in mind is that when there was this matrimonial alliance with the Licchavis and the Guptas, we find that Chandragupta first did not have complete control over the Licchavi territory. It was only when his son Samudragupta came to the throne of the Guptas that the Licchavi territory was amalgamated into the Gupta kingdom. So we can say that it was because of this matrimonial alliance with the Licchavis that the rise of the Guptas truly happened. Now the period before the Guptas in historical terminology is called the post-Mauryan period. In this video, I have talked about the post-Mauryan period in brief. So you can watch this video to know more about this period. Thank you for watching.